Thanks for choosing this free Anfield Index podcast. If you'd prefer to listen to this or any of our other shows without adverts, then now's the time to check out Anfield Index Pro. With AI Pro, you can supercharge your entire listening experience. You'll not only get all of our podcasts without the ads, but you'll have them far faster with our quick publish feature available exclusively for subscribers. AI Pro also puts you in the heart of our sound studio, with an option to listen to many of our shows live and interact with the podcasters in real time as the shows are recording. Upgrading couldn't be easier. AI Pro is available on all popular podcast platforms, and we have our own apps for Apple and Android. Just head on over to AnfieldIndexPro.com and get started today.
Hello and welcome to AI Scouted. I'm not Dave. He has just had surgery yesterday. He is in Discord though, so I assume he's okay, but he's still in the hospital. I'm not sure if he's back tomorrow or whatnot, so I will be doing the Daily Red later on today. And Two Footed is probably gone till Monday, I presume. But that's for later. Karl, you've had an eventful morning. How are you?
Too bad, thank you. Now comfortably sat in a chair and with a cup of tea, so the world is almost back to rights again.
That does sound right. I had a tea ready. But what was it? An hour and 43 minutes ago.
I know you minus 62 teas for all the times that I've had to wait for. Dave more than you, but you know, same thing.
Definitely Dave more than me. But I won't add your score on because you get one a year. You get one a year where emergency.
Done well to make this one be more than one entire match then.
Absolutely. But if Dave's ever listens to this, he will guarantee that I need to add the score. But anyway, Liverpool doing transfer stuff, Karl. I have not seen Arthur Melo probably since his Barcelona days before he became a financial money laundering player. But I remember him being very talented at Barcelona, but by most people's opinions, the Juventus move's not gone too well, but most people also say there is a player in there. So what are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't necessarily be the only one who hasn't seen him, because I think quite a few Juventus fans would say a similar sort of thing, to be perfectly honest with you. I like Arthur as a player. I don't really like what Juventus have done in midfield by and large over the last couple of years. It was 2021 when he moved over there, so he's had 2 full seasons now. This season he's not been involved. It's a bit of an odd one how they've used him at times. I mean, when he went there, let's say 2021, they were quite often trying to play like a bit more of a flat midfield four. He was partnered quite a bit early on in the season with Rabiot at one stage, and then it was Weston McKennie as well. And at times it worked. That first half of that season, he did look really good. He was the ball winner in there. He was very, very aggressive. He was not so much of a ball carrier. He can be, but that wasn't really his role. I mean, if he was playing alongside Weston McKennie, obviously that was his role. But he was a good protector. He was a very, very combative sort of player. But as the season went on, obviously Juventus were not particularly consistent as a whole. He fell out of favour. He got himself an injury as well at one point, and I don't really think he came back into the side at all from, say, about February onwards. So, half and half season there for him. Last year, back under Allegri again, obviously, not so much in favour at all, really. I mean, he didn't even play 1,000 minutes in Serie A last season. He was not a regular in the Champions League 11 either. So, it was really only if games were either already done and dusted or unlikely to be salvaged that he really got himself involved, to be honest. It was, if anything, the other way around. In terms of the second half of the season, he was a bit more involved. If anybody remembers last year, Juve at one point were quite far out of the run-in, and then they got themselves back in. So he was involved a little bit there. Again, much more of a holding midfield role, not really the central or box-to-box role, which was a bit more of what he was renowned for at Barcelona, because I don't think he was renowned for anything at Barcelona other than the transfer to somehow make it even worse and bring in Milan Pjanic, which has been such a disaster for everybody concerned. It's just not even funny anymore. Artur, there is a player in there, but you have to use him in the right way, and I'm not really sure that anybody has really wanted to use him as a first choice at this point, which obviously has to give us pause a little bit to say what's his ceiling, what's his consistency level, what's his actual game-to-game capacity, because he's 26 now and he's not really established himself as a first teamer. Not just at Barcelona, who were an absolute mess in midfield, obviously, for quite some time, but also at Juve, who have just, in all honesty, they're not that good. They're not. They're just not what they were.
Especially in midfield.
I'm not very impressed with the squad that they've put together again. I mean, obviously a few players come in who have big names like Pogba and Di Maria and that sort of thing. But as a group, as a unit, how they put together the centre of the park, not massively impressed yet. They're going to replace him with Leandro Paredes, basically, who is now coming from PSG, who is, again, a deep player, a ball winner, but a bit more probably graceful in possession, probably a bit more of an expansive passer than Artur has been over the last couple of years. And I think the only thing I can really say is that Artur, at this point, he looks like much more of a scurrying about midfield ball winner. So maybe it's the fact that we're going to play three in midfield, that he can play as an 8 and is kind of released to roam and rampage and win the ball back. Whether it would be a first choice or not, I have my doubts. We'll get into that a little bit more maybe, but I can see that there's more scope to use him in both halves of the pitch in a 3-man midfield rather than a 2, which obviously Juve have played quite a lot of.
Yeah, if there's noise on my mic, there's a truck outside, so I can't do anything about that, people. But who does he compare to any of our current midfielders? I think some people maybe said he's probably more suited to the defensive 8, or am I just chatting absolute wham there?
No, I think he probably would be the more suited out of the two. But again, I think that's because of how he's been used over the last couple of years. I mean, when he came over from Brazil, he was a bit more able to get forward in his earliest days.
Oh God, he's Lucas Leiva.
No, he's definitely not a Lucas. I definitely think he's naturally more defensively minded than Lucas, but he was a player who could go box to box. I mean, his earliest games at Barcelona, he played as quite an offensive midfielder, to be honest. It was not the case like they were always on the front foot or anything at the time either, but he was one of the more supporting midfielders. So he can move into the final third, but as I say, at Juve, he's barely been used that way at all. So he has been much more of I'd say in terms of a ball winner, quite similar to Keita, in that he's like quite quick over the ground, quite aggressive to go through a couple of challenges at once. He's actually a much more aggressive individual than Keita, but I mean in the way that Keita makes the tackles. It's not like a Fabinho where he lets them come to him and then does not let them pass one way or another. It's much more a proactive, go seeking the ball kind of challenge. His passing range is nowhere near Thiago's level, but he's not bad. He's very, very reliable when he's in the team and regularly getting minutes, obviously, in terms of short distance passing. I would say he's better than Henderson on the ball for sure, but not at Thiago's level at all.
Who is, to be fair. So he's a bit of a mix of a few by the sounds of it, which is quite interesting. You said you have doubts about him being a starter, which I think in the situation we are, I think that's kind of expected. But Henderson obviously pulled up injured, in air quotes. Yes. We have the Naby situation, whether he's injured or transfer dispute or falling out, whatever the crack, he's unavailable one way or another. Thiago's made of Pringles. So he will get a lot of football. But basically what you've said, that we've not seen him play a lot of football, and obviously we have basically 3 games a week, basically for the rest of the season bar the World Cup. Is the durability maybe the main question mark here, rather than quality of play, or maybe just lack of understanding what he actually is?
You mean from a Liverpool perspective?
Yeah.
To be honest, at this point, I feel like availability might be the defining factor here. I said to you just before we came on air, it feels very, very different to the usual transfers that we've done in terms of the planning and preparation, and even the moment of the market when we've gone in and made our offer. This is a lot closer, in my feelings this morning to the Kabak sort of we need a body, not in terms of quality but in terms of availability. He's like I said, he's not on the list of requirements for Juventus this season. Obviously, they're quite keen to offload him. He's someone who's available. He's someone who has played in a top European league. He's someone who's on loan. All of that kind of points to, well, we'll go for him. That's a body and through the door. It's probably not going to cost an absolute fortune. I've not really seen too much reliable other than Di Marzio in terms of actually saying about the structure of the deal and that at the moment. But you wouldn't be too surprised if it was this year that we see him for at this moment in time, I don't think.
Yeah, we don't tend to do loans and then sign people. It tends to be the way. What's it, Kabak, Sahin? Who else have we loaned? I can't think of many. It's not a regular deal we do. Anything else to add on Arthur before I ask about, well, potentially other transfers?
I wouldn't say so, really. I mean, like I said before, he is a bit of an all-round midfielder in terms of he can be a deeper ball winner. He's definitely not the same type of defensive midfielder as Fabinho. Don't get me wrong. He can play that 6 role because that's where he has played. He has played deepest and been quite an important player in his own way and in his own moments. But consistency has got to be the biggest concern at this moment in time, simply because of he's not been able to break into the Juventus midfield, which is not one of Europe's finest. But reliability and availability, he's been pretty good for that. He has been on the bench an awful lot, so it's not a case of he's been out injured, which is at the moment possibly something we just need, somebody who's available, nowhere near as let's say picking up niggles and that sort of thing as the likes of Keita have been, Thiago have been, that sort of thing. So I do think he's a reasonable addition. If he was already here, let's put it that way, if we weren't signing him, if he was already here, he'd be somebody we used, and you wouldn't be like crying if he was in the team. But nor would I think that if everybody was fit and we had a semi-final coming up, I doubt many people would put him in their preferred lineups.
Signing the squad option, which is kind of what we all expected. Moving on then, there is rumours going about that we're not done in the market, because the name Douglas Louise keeps popping up. Beyond that, it seems to be other Premier League names. We all know about Tielemans and stuff like that. We're no point in discussing him. But I'll ask you about Douglas Louise, because he is the most common name. He can score from corners. That's about it. In his first season, he seemed to be quite an impressive talent, but I think it was the second year under Dean Smith, or might have been the third by then, and certainly under Gerrard, he just seems to have fallen away. I mean, is this just another one where, if it does happen, because it looks like Villa are trying to sign Den Donker, which might open the door for us, or Arsenal, or Atletico Madrid, who else are linked, would you be all right with that one? Because it seems to be quite versatile in midfield, but I think that one's more of a quality option rather than we don't know what he is, because by that first maybe 6 months, he's kind of just dropped off a cliff from my viewing.
Yeah, he's definitely not been as on it, let's say, as he did during that starting period. I don't know whether that is to do with, obviously, the change of management. He's had a bit of a change of role. They brought in Kamara, who's now basically the defensive midfielder, and then Louise has had a role either on the side as one of the eights, on the side of the diamond at times. He has played in a double pivot a couple of times with him as well, but it doesn't seem like that's really the role that they've picked out for him at all. He has a hammer shot on him, that's for sure. I would see Louise more for us as a very terrier-like ball spraying number 8, kind of like what Henderson was a few years ago, to be honest. Not too dissimilar to that in terms of someone who can overlap in the channels, lots and lots of running to their game, can hunt down and press and win the ball, that kind of thing, but is not creative on the ball, I wouldn't say. I mean, he's got a decent range of passing, he can make a pass, but like Henderson used to be alright at passing. His long range passing used to be pretty good before he doing this thing where, he just flicks it up in the air and does the first time no look clipped cross into the box to nobody at all, that sort of thing. Henderson used to be
the bane of my life.
Annoying. He used to be decent though. He used to be a good passer. His short range passing was fairly reliable. His longer range passing was pretty decent, and I think that's pretty much how I describe Louise. They're not the same player, obviously, but I do think they're similarities to how Henderson's better traits were a few years ago. It's not really the same sort of thing that we see now. You don't really see Henderson overlapping down the right-hand side too much or really bombing into the box on a regular basis. Louise doesn't really get into the box either, it should be probably noted. He's one of the players who sort of gets to the box and stops. He's not really in it too much, which is probably tactical, but also probably because his, let's say, scoring traits are, hitting it no slower than 150 mile an hour, and it's probably a bit more chance of him scoring there for you if he's a bit further out of the box.
Yeah. Tom James is asking in the chat, basically the domestic players we're kind of linked with. Who would you prefer, Louise, Tielemans or Sanderberg?
Right, Sanderberg is a championship player who I've not seen because he's a championship player. So I'm going to assume he's playing at championship level and therefore is not just bottom but about 17 levels down. Now, maybe he's going to surprise me and someone can go into that chat group and tell me, but he's in the championship and has been there for a bit of time now for a reason. So as far as I'm concerned, leave him there. Louise and Yuri Tielemans. Are we assuming that they would be exact same price?
All seem to be about 20 to 25 mil, so I'd assume so.
I mean, I've said before, I think we've left Tielemans behind, to be honest, or he has left the ability to get to this level behind by not moving on from Leicester maybe a year or two ago. In the era where we were, let's say, overcoming that side where we still had like Lallana in the team and Origi didn't just play for 4 minutes at a time and that sort of thing. That era of Klopp was where Tielemans would have been a really good signing for us. He was a very good player. He was obviously 4 years younger at the time as well. He would have been someone who could help us get a step up, but we're like quite a way beyond that now, like much, much further beyond that. Not taking into account this season's results and short-term form and injuries and all the rest of it, but we're past what he's up to at this point, to be perfectly honest. So I wouldn't really take Tielemans unless it was either a free next summer, or I'm not sure. If we decide to change completely the way that we played, maybe he contributes a different way to the build-up. But he doesn't really fit for what I would add to the team at this point, to be honest. So it would be Louise out of the two. But again, I wouldn't be signing Douglas Louise and thinking that he is going to be our starting number 8. He would be a good addition to the squad, assuming that Klopp and the coaches get to work on him and find more consistency in his game and all the rest of it. But again, I wouldn't have him at the top of my wish lists if it is just to get another addition in through the door and boost the squad. And he's basically, let's say, taking the place of Oxlade-Chamberlain, something like that. Yes, yeah, I'd be on board with that. He's a good enough player. There's certainly more to come from him. I do think he's able to get to a better level with better players around him, better coaches. This isn't someone like Artur Melo, who's already been at Barcelona and has had decent coaches. Maybe not the managers have always been the best, but at Barca he had good coaches. He had really good players around him. He's got good players around him now as well, just not elite level ones. But Douglas Louise has not always been in that situation, apart from maybe when he was at Man City. He's had loan spells after that where he's been playing in lesser sides and has been the better of them. And now he's in the Premier League, and at times you can see he goes up against really good players and he gets the best of them in matches. But he's not been at one of those top clubs yet, or had, let's say, absolutely elite management and coaching around him all the time. So that would be an interesting one to watch him. And I think that even at the international level, I think there's probably more to come from him than there is from Tielemans at this stage of their careers.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I think Louise certainly is better fitting at the minute in terms of how we play. But I think even regardless who we sign, I think ideally our midfield would still be Fabinho, Thiago. Just my point of view, it'd probably still be Naby, but let's say Elliott more realistically. But then Henderson will obviously play a lot, so it'll be interesting to see if these people we actually sign play, if we do sign them, or if it is just the short-term fix that we dread, or certainly Klopp seems to dread. But it'd be interesting to see if we do buy another one. But let's get on to the Everton game, because that's kind of why we originally were here. They are 17th, Karl. They lost their first 2 games of the season, then drew 3 in a row. Very boring to watch. Don't have a striker at the minute. Or they do, but it's Rondon, then why would you? Yeah, your overall thoughts on Everton before we get into the game a bit deeper.
Two thoughts on Everton. One, pretty funny, aren't they? It's pretty funny, let's be honest. And the other is that no matter how bad Liverpool's season gets at any point in the campaign, you can always rest assured. Just look a bit further down the funny columns, look a bit further down the league table, look a bit further down wherever you want, and there you will find Everton. It's a thing of beauty. I did very, very much enjoy a brief spell, albeit very early on in the season, where Moyes' boys made up the bottom three, and it was Everton, West Ham and Man United. That was a particularly fun moment. Not that I really have anything against David Moyes anymore, it's just Everton, really. I think it's fair to say we can expect an improvement from Everton, which is not really saying much considering they still haven't won a game of football this year. They did sign Neil Maupay, so they do have another forward, and I presume that he'll be involved sooner or later. Yeah. Calvert-Lewin, no, I'm not having it, mate. I did say this when we went over them at the end of last season and pre-season. He's the one I would have sold, not Richarlison. Calvert-Lewin's a very good forward, number 9. If you're getting plenty of balls in the box and you're creating things in and around the penalty spot for him, he's a good finisher, one-touch finisher. Hold-up play is obviously okay as well, but as an overall player, I think they could have done a lot better to sell him and either keep Richarlison or rebuild from the money from Calvert-Lewin. And that's even before you factor in the fact that he's now apparently just constantly injured. He has effectively had one very good season of goal scoring, and even that was probably not the entire campaign, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that was under Carlo as well, so manager drop off. Quite a big one there. They're a very odd team. Flip-flopping between 3 at the back and 4 at the back. Maybe that's due to injuries or just Lampard being random. But they have just been awful to watch. 3 draws in a row. Haven't really watched the Leeds game. Brentford, again, why would I watch it? But the Forest game, by what I was watching there, or the highlights I've seen of that, it looked like it was just a dead game, and Forest probably should have kept their 1-0 lead, but the 2 losses they lost to Aston Villa, which sums it up at the minute. But they played last night, I think, or was it Tuesday? I don't really care. They went with Pickford, Patterson, Connor Cody, James Tarkowski, Mikolenko in a back 4, I should say here. And then in midfield, they had Tom Davies, Onana, the new lad, Alex Iwobi, who is basically this season's Joelinton, Dwight McNeil, Damari Gray, and Anthony Gordon. What position would you like to discuss first, Karl? Because they all need discussing.
Might as well start at the back then, mate.
Right, Pickford, he's still crap.
He's still crap, and he's still very, very busy. Now, I am going to give Jordan Pickford an unexpected boost here and say I think he's been one of their best players so far this season. That's obviously partly out of necessity because, as I said, he's been a very, very busy man. But he has been doing the job. He has been doing the business more often than not. He's made a lot of quite important saves for them at quite important times to keep them in games. I have had the, misfortune or fortune, depending on which way you want to look at it, of watching all of Everton's league games this season, not the League Cup nonsense, obviously.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
That's horrid.
No, it's been intriguing, to be honest. And I will pick out a few bits that I've liked, actually, as well, about this team. But the biggest issue, as you just alluded to it there, is the organisation still. It's still a shambles. Like, there are a few things that they seem to be doing quite well, and then he will change it. He will change the system, either in midfield or the defensive line, and that will be gone. And the balance there is upset, and you're not trying to fix the bits that have not been as good, but keep the bits which have been good. That's the biggest mystery to me so far. But Pickford, I think, has been pretty consistent, to be honest. He's never going to be an elite goalkeeper all round, but he's a very good shot stopper as long as the ball's not, more than sort of 4 feet away from him. He has to a bit more of a stretch sort of thing.
A toddler's arm's length or whatever.
Yeah, exactly so, yeah. It'd be interesting, obviously, refer back to one of the other podcasts if anybody was listening at the time, see if he's wearing Scotty Parker's jumper coming into the match, and bit of a tribute there to a fellow Englishman. I don't think that he has made any absolute howlers this season. There's been a couple of moments where obviously he could have done a bit better, but in general, I don't think that too many of the goals I would put down to him at all. Obviously, there was a penalty. There was an own goal off Digne, was it, in the Villa match in the end? It was kind of a real mix-up of nonsense. There was the Nottingham Forest goal, which was a really, really good finish. Maybe that one you could say was a bit on Pickford because it was his save into not a tremendous area, but it was a relatively difficult save to make in the first instance anyway. And I play a lot of football, but I've never really played in goal too much. I'm not going to say that, he definitely should have palmed it out wide. Yes, he should have, but that was it seems to be a difficult skill to do, to save and direct the ball out somewhere. So I'm hesitant to put too much on him, because even then it was still a really, really good finish from Brennan Johnson. Brentford, again, close range goal, nothing he could do about that. And then Leeds the other night, Sinistera's goal was pretty good. He completely wrong-footed Pickford. So maybe, again, there's a little bit of a decision to be made there, and Pickford sort of half-stepped towards his right, expecting the shot to be bent into the far corner, and Sinistera clipped it near post instead. So nothing he can do after he's made the move, but lots of defenders in the way. I don't really think that there's a fault there on Pickford at all. So I'm actually going to put Pickford quite high up in Everton's list of performers this season.
Christ. To be fair, I've only watched the televised games. So. We'll move on to the defence. And when I said they moved to a back four, it looks like it's more to do with injury, because I didn't realise Holgate was injured as well.Mina's obviously made literally worse than all our midfielders put together injury-wise. So he won't. I think he's injured basically for the season, isn't he? Ben Godfrey with that horrid, was it Chelsea game? I think it was that horrid tackle where he his leg just went. And Holgate, let's have a look. He's up on his knee. Looks like he's out for our game anyway. So we'd guess it'd be Cody and Tarkowski again in a back four against us. We know Conor Cody's limitations in a back four, but playing quite deep, which I think they do in general, but against Liverpool, it will be 12 men behind the ball. So I don't think the change in system will be that big of an issue for someone like Cody. It's just maybe them individual moments, probably against someone like a Bobby or a Darwin. But that back four, the two centre-backs, I should say, I've always liked Tarkowski. Michael Keane's alive, isn't he? He might play.
Yes. Yeah, he was an unused sub the other day, which I thought was intriguing against Leeds, when either they could have gone a bit more defensive, obviously, in the second half when they were coming under pressure, and they could have gone to the back three then and left, obviously, Cody centrally and put Keane as an extra man. He actually didn't make any subs in that game, though, neither holding on to what they had nor trying to adjust the system when Leeds were pushing on, obviously looking for their equaliser. Nothing at all. There was no reaction. Not even later in the game, he didn't go for the points himself. So I have to ask Frank about that one, I'm afraid.
To be fair, I think Michael Keane's been that bad basically since he's moved to Everton. Probably the right decision.
Yeah, but you think what Keane's strengths were before they bought him and paid so much money on him, another one of those transfers which everybody somehow forgets about, that Everton spend a shit ton of money. Back to with James Tarkowski alongside him, and obviously the system that both of those were used to playing in. Surely there must be some temptation there at the very least to either stick with the three with Cody or to partner two players who played for the same team in the same system in a two together. At least in terms of familiarity and leadership there, they should be able to play a bit better, I think, than relying on somebody who, like you say, we know is not too well suited to playing in a two all the time. I'm
just surprised they didn't get Ben Mee as well. They could have had all the Burnley.
They tried. They probably tried.
probably. But would you expect them to stick with a four, or would you maybe bring in? Well, I suppose I could put Mikalenko back there, but he's not really. We've not seen that yet. But they do. No. I'm guessing Vinagre is still fit. But would you stick with a two against us and just have everyone behind the ball? Would you bring Michael Keane in maybe to? I don't think Darwin will start, but we'll get on to that in a sec. But who would be best dealt with to deal with Bobby in that role?
To be honest, they'd be better off signing a new defender very quickly. I think looking at how teams have played against Liverpool and given us problems, he will probably be tempted to stick with the two. I mean, you think of Newcastle last night, obviously, and a couple of the games that we've had this season where we've not really managed to get runners in behind too well. We haven't played quickly enough. I think he will be tempted to stick with the two. I'm not saying that that's the right thing. I'm not saying that that's what I would do, but I'm just trying to get into maybe the managers and what they might be looking to do with their own teams. And I think going to a 3 leaves them really light in midfield as well. It's not just about the centre-backs, it is that centre of midfield. And they were playing a double pivot in there, whether it was a back 4 or a back 3 at the start of the season. It was always a 2-man central midfield, but I don't think that Lampard's very happy with the balance that they have in there. I mean, it started off with Doucouré being in there. I think he's actually now sidelined as well. Then they went a couple of games ago, it was against Brentford, they went with Onana and Iwobi. Alex Iwobi is top of my list of Everton players this season. He has been excellent, absolutely superb. He is now not an attacking midfielder, not a number 10, not a playmaker, not a supporting forward. He's now a box-to-box midfielder, and this boy is excellent. He is taking on board the jobs that he's got to do and giving it absolutely everything. He is non-stop work rate. He is really good at ball winning. Ball carrying, obviously, has always been a good trait of his. He's never afraid of a challenge. Aerially, not awesome, but will get involved and will certainly try and help out. He's basically won himself a place in the team and is playing like a player who has been waiting for this chance for a long, long time. So he is, without question, their top player at this point, defensively and defensively. Mm-hmm. But the knock-on effect of him being a real box-to-box player is that you either have to have someone alongside him who can sit and play passing a little bit more reliably, and obviously let him rampage forwards when he needs to. And they tried in that Brentford game with Onana, who's their new signing, who does look really exciting. He looks like a really, really good player. I didn't see loads of him in France because he wasn't a regular starter or anything, but when he came on, he could be a bit of a game changer. But he's also a bit loose in possession. He's also quite a bit lax at the minute in terms of his positional work, and he looks just as capable of creating a goal as letting the opposition score a goal. And he has already cost a couple of goals with either dodgy possession moments, all that sort of thing. So when you have both of those,
he came on and just added chaos. Didn't he?
Honestly, it was like watching the Tasmanian Devil come on a sub, and it was like everything was going to happen, but you didn't know which way at all. It was a lot of fun to watch. But against Brentford, what you really saw by pairing those two is that when Everton were in transitions, it was very, very exciting, except for when they lost the ball, and then there was this great cavernous gap behind them. So they needed an extra one in midfield, which has been Davies, apparently. So he's been sort of either the sort of sitting midfielder or letting Onana sit, and he will try and break forward, but in between Iwobi and Onana. So that was what they tried against Leeds. It was a bit better in terms of filling out the gaps, but that knock-on effect is that you have to have a back 4 instead of a back 3. So that's where they're really trying to get the balance at the moment. Iwobi in central midfield, very, very good. Tarkowski in centre-back, okay since his debut, I'd say. Didn't have a particularly great start, but not too bad. But they really have a big difficulty at the moment in finding a balance between an extra man in midfield and an extra man at centre-back. They basically don't have the right profile of player in either of those roles that they need to go alongside the one that they do have, who's playing very well.
Well, I think they're going to sign 2 midfielders by the looks of it in the last day. Garner for about 10 mil, I think, is joining, and the Idrissa Gana Gay stuff has basically been going on for about 8 years now, I think.
Considering they want him, he wants to go back, and Paris Saint-Germain don't want anything to do with him. I can't believe how long that deal is taking.
I mean, would either of them come straight in? Because I'd guess Garner is more of the sitting Liddell Pilo type. I'd never really watched Nottingham Forest. We know what Idrissa Gana Gay is. More sitter. Well, he did a bit of Kante stuff now and again, but I'm guessing he's more of a sitter nowadays in his old age. But would either of them add balance to the midfield, and maybe once they get more defensive options back, the back 4 can be a more settled thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to know about James Garner, to be honest. I mean, there's always been huge what do we say, hype around him and expectation around him, but obviously he's not yet fully done stuff, has he? Certainly not at the top level. So he could be really good for them, but I'm a bit hesitant to say of how good he'll be, because not been in the top flight league quite often enough. I don't think he's not really been on the radar of absolutely about to break into the Man United team and so on and so forth. So I assume that he's going to be good. But again, you're looking here more box to box than just holding midfield. That's not someone who's going to sit. He's good on the ball. He's certainly aggressive in terms of challenging and that, and he will play defensively if you need him to, but that's not specifically and primarily his game, is it? He's not someone who's going to sit there. I would assume they'll try and use Idrissa Gana Gueye as that holder midfielder if they want someone who's just going to purely sit. But again, that's not what his game was. Certainly not when he was at Everton, certainly not at PSG. Maybe they're going to use him as that now because he's a little bit obviously older, maybe that more game intelligence and experience that he can use now to sit. But again, he was a rampaging, run all over the box destroyer. He was last in the Premier League, and his first season in France, he was N'Golo Kante light. That's what he was. He was someone who you would have the midfielder sat beside to fill the gaps, and he would go and win the ball and hunt it wherever it was. And he was excellent at that. But you can't just have a midfield of people who go after the ball. Otherwise, if you miss it, everybody else is running in behind you. And that's bit of a concern of mine, to be honest. I mean, if you have maybe Ghana, Iwobi, and Idrissa, maybe one of those can be told to sit, but then you've still got to fit in Onana somewhere because they've spent an awful lot of money on him. So it's an interesting mix that they're going to have of a lot of very, very similar people. And
all the box-to-box destroyers, Karl. All
That's
10
it.
of them. Let's go.
Just a diamond of rotating box-to-box players.
Gordon up front on his own, and then everyone else has legs behind him. But I mean, we mentioned Anthony Gordon there. We'll move on to the attack, or lack of attack, I should say. The £60 million never happened boy. He's obviously their main attacker at the minute, although I think Demarai Gray is probably doing just as well, to be fair. Dwight McNeil doesn't, from what I've seen, doesn't look right in that system. But hey-ho, he might settle and get better. But just a lack of focal point. I think you're kind of seeing, I know they're not the most attacking team, well, maybe the most defensive team ever, but you just see the lack of a focal point, a lack of organisation. We mentioned that there's just no system to their attack. I think it's basically hope something happens and then one of the fast lads get on a break. They don't seem to be addressing the attack, so I'm guessing, I don't think it's for this game, but I'm guessing Calvert-Lewin will be back soonish, but how long that'll last, we can't really say.
No, I mean, like I said before, I expect Neil Maupay to start this game. They've obviously spent a bit of money on bringing him in.
I keep forgetting they bought him. Yeah.
So he should be available for this game now. He wasn't registered on in time for the week game is the word I'm looking for here, but he's fine now, obviously, in terms of being registered and that. I think it speaks quite huge volumes on what Lampard thinks of Rondon, in that he didn't start the first game when they didn't have a forward. He did come off the bench and was it in that game? I think it might have been the second game, and did okay bits. He helped them a bit again in that Everton one after Nana came on as well, and so Rondon was all right in that game. And then he did start him in the third game, and that's the one that he started so far, and he was terrible. And he hooked him against Nottingham Forest. Obviously, they didn't beat Forest, and he's not been back in the team since then. And he didn't even bring him on against Leeds. So that kind of tells you where he is with Rondon. He is going to be an emergency when needed, and maybe not even then third choice forward. So I would expect that they line up with Gordon, Gray, and Maupay to start with.
Yeah,
Neil, I agree. I do think he's been a bit unfortunate in that not been brought in and played in his actual role. He has played as the centre forward a couple of times. He has played from the right hand side, trying to get him to cut in, obviously, which I never think he looks as comfortable with. He is much more of a stay wide kind of player, isn't he? His strengths are not so much in cutting in, dribbling and shooting. We even saw that last year with Burnley when they tried to switch things up and play him on that side. His best strengths are getting the ball in space and hitting the flank, getting past players and delivering really good crosses into the box. So they've not really nailed it down with him yet, but Demarai Gray I think has been pretty good as well. I think Gordon would be probably Everton's second best performer behind Iwobi for me. And he is certainly in the last couple of games obviously scored a couple of goals, but he's finding a bit more end product in general. We know what he is in terms of what he's been over the last year or so. A real pain in the ass, a horrible player to play against, someone who'll barge into you, rile the crowd up, get on everybody's nerves, dive as many times as he can in a 15-minute spell. All that really narky, nasty, annoying stuff, which if he's on your team, you'll love, especially if you're a side, basically, and he's helping to get you upfield and all the rest of it. But this year he is also adding, I think better decision making is probably the best way to frame it. It's not just about scoring the goals, but it is about when to take on the shot. You know, last season it was just block shot, shooting straight into crowds of people. It was because he had cut inside and he was on his favoured foot, he would shoot, not necessarily because that was the right thing to do. Whereas this year, I think he's obviously taken a bit more lead, a bit more responsibility in that attack. He is trying to create things a little bit more as well. And I think the fact that Demarai Gray has started the season quite well as well helps him, because he hasn't got to do every single thing himself. So it would be probably best to describe their attack as fluid and interchanging, but that's not always by design and because that's how they want to play, but rather because he's just searching for the right combination of how to get people into better areas, who to play at centre forward until they have an actual number 9 available, all that sort of thing. It's been interesting to watch at times, but it has made it an incredibly difficult to watch at times as well, because they just don't have that structure in build-up play. They don't really have the repetition of patterns to get the same player into the same positions to score the same type of goals often enough. Like, you know what a Liverpool goal looks like, you know what a Man City goal looks like, you don't really know what an Everton goal looks like, other than Gordon running behind people and shooting quickly. So it's still something to be worked on. Neil Maupay, as we know, good movement, aggressive, annoying, not always the best finisher. So it'll be interesting to see how much he can add in terms of giving them a bit more of a focal point and giving them someone to play off. And maybe unlike Brighton, Everton don't actually need Maupay, their number 9, to be a constant goal scorer, but rather someone who can help that structure of attack and the combination plays in the final third, because they do have a couple of wide goal scorers. So Gordon, obviously, now we're thinking might be one. It might not necessarily be this year he finds total consistency, but previous to this season, he had scored 1 goal for Everton, which wasn't a deflection. He's already got 2 for this year, so it's a step forward at the very least.
Yeah, I think it should be more. It should be interesting. I think Maupay is probably the one who could play with Calvert-Lewin or without Calvert-Lewin. So I think that's quite a good signing, even though I forgot he existed a minute ago. But yeah, I think that's quite a clever sign. I think he was only about 10 to 15 mil, wasn't he? So that's not too bad. He did seem to fall out with Graham Potter though, so it's not a good one where we know Frank can cast aside people. But that'll be interesting to see. I'd probably agree. I think you got to throw in Maupay at this point. He's given us a bit of trouble in the past as well in the odd Brighton game, so that should be. I think that should work as a front three. Midfield will be interesting to see, because I think we both agree Iwobi are definitely starting. Onana with the absence of Decore will probably start, and the defence probably just stick as. Let's move on to us. You were obviously on Raw last night, so we don't need to reflect on the game too much against Newcastle. But the defence, Matip was back on the bench, but barring protecting him from injuries, because that is a thing with Gomez, I wouldn't really change that too much. The fullbacks, if it wasn't Everton, I'd probably argue that we should possibly change at least one of them, because Trent's been pretty stanky, but in Robbo, maybe a bit more of a long-term concern. He just doesn't look like the Robbo of old. But if it wasn't Everton, I'd maybe argue that. But with it being Everton, I think you do kind of need the experienced heads in there.
No, I'm gonna make the call and say Tsimikas comes in. To be honest, I have to say I don't think actually Tsimikas has been at his best either. When he's come on, he's not really been the impactful player that he has been previously. But I think right now is probably when we start looking at not just the game that we've got, but the games that are ahead as well. Because it is now going to be every 3 days, every 4 days that we play, all the way through to the international break, obviously, and then again beyond to the World Cup. So Everton away, Napoli away. It's not the nicest pair of fixtures that we'll ever play consecutively. I think that there is a case to be made, exactly what you've just said, that there are a few players who have not been playing well enough to keep their place in the side. And maybe we use that as an opportunity to, at the very least, if they're not hitting top form, have them in top energy levels. Because again, we mentioned on Raw, that was something that I think has still been lacking this season. So we've seen Klopp not be too afraid to make changes against Everton in the past. We've all seen the absolutely mad Derby 11s which have come out over the last few years. And I wouldn't be surprised if we do get a couple of changes. I would keep Gomez in myself. I think he's been all right, and I would like to maybe get another game out of him at the very least first. Obviously, I'm not really sure how much training Matip has had as well as the other thing. We don't want Matip coming back, which has happened before, playing a game and going down again with another injury. So he's only had, 2 days training, I think, before the Newcastle game. So maybe it would be another 2 days training before Newcastle. So maybe that's one to change in midweek, so that we only change one in the defensive line each time.
Mm-hmm. No, I can certainly see an argument for Tsimikas. I think Milner's probably the option at right back unless we do move someone in centre back and move Gomez. But moving on to the midfield, I'm guessing Milner will be the one coming in for Henderson because Jones has only just come back. Arthur, we're not sure if he's injured or available, and he's not signed yet, so touch wood if he does sign, or if anything goes wrong. We've had the Fekir situation. But I'd guess it's just Milner in for Henderson, which, to be fair, the way Henderson's playing, I think that's an upgrade. And let's be honest, Henderson, regardless of what you think of him, he just simply doesn't suit that left-sided role at all. Whereas Milner, that's basically been his primary position for us in recent years.
Yeah, I mean, I think Milner's been better than Henderson this season. They've not had too dissimilar in terms of minutes. I think it's 207 for Milner, 310 or so for Henderson. So I think Milner's been better, pure and simple, and I think Milner is better in that left-sided midfield role as well. If it was another, again, similar to Matip, I think if it was another few days along, I would be tempted to put Curtis Jones straight in, to be perfectly honest. I do like him in that left-sided role. I know it's not maybe his best, and I've seen some people don't really like him in that role, but I do. I think he's reliable. I think he offers a decent blend between consistency in his ball play and a little bit more creativity. But in any case, it's not. So I think Milner to come in is the right one there. Harvey Elliott, I think, is one of the first names on the team sheet at the moment. Whether you think that that's by availability of others or his own performance levels, I don't really care. I think he has earned the right to be in the team at this stage. I don't think that, again, that will be all the way through, because, again, we're going to have such regular changes around now in midfield, especially with the games coming. So I wouldn't be surprised, again, for example, if maybe Elliott is one of the ones to come out for the Napoli match. But for this game, he's earned it. I'm keeping him in.
No, I fully agree. I think he's been probably. Has he been our best player? Is he the Iwobi of this team? Is he our undisputed best player?
I think he is. I think he's certainly in the competition. Yeah, I think there's only been really maybe 2 or 3 players who've been consistently good, and even like Diaz, who I think has been good in general, he's had a game or so where he's not really been at it at the start of the season. So I think Elliott has been consistently closer to his own best level anyway.
Yeah, I'd probably put that. Mo's been quietly efficient, but quietly is the probably word you focus on there. Yeah, it probably is Elliott. Moving into the attack then, I think we kind of mentioned this whilst we were doing the Everton bit. Mo and Diaz will definitely start, but do you throw Darwin straight in? Because Bobby...
No.
One stinky game, and then he was good last night.
No, not at all. There's no call to put Darwin Núñez in this game. He's not obviously earned
he will headbutt Cody.
I mean, let's hope that he has learned from this, because it must have been, not obviously against Bournemouth, but in the other games. I imagine that for a player who actually cares about football and for a player who actually cares about his teammates, which you would like to think is every player, but isn't. But let's assume Darwin Núñez is one of those players, right? It must have been quite difficult for him to watch on against Man United with how we were playing and thinking, I could be out there, but I was a dick. And against Newcastle up until like the last 10 seconds, again, exactly the same thing. We should be winning here. I probably could give us something, but I'm not able to because of my own actions. I'd like to think that that's a lesson that people can learn, right? Some people are incapable of this lesson. And yes, I'm looking at you, Granit Xhaka. And yes, I'm looking at you, Joey Barton, and yes, I'm looking at you, all you other ones who have done the exact same things throughout your careers and cost yourself availability on a regular basis. Maybe Darwin's that, and maybe we get to see that over the next few years. I'm hopeful not. Partly because he plays for Liverpool, partly because we spend so much money on him, and partly because we can't really afford for £100 million players to not be available on a regular basis. So let's assume that he doesn't go and get himself sent off or suspended in silly ways again in future. There is still the question of, have you deserved to be in the team? Have you put in the performances? I'd say no is the answer to both of those. He's had a couple of really good impacts, but that's not enough. Whereas Firmino, obviously, at the moment, like you say, we never know what we're going to get. And Firmino is one of the players who, form, I'm not honestly sure he knows the word, because he can turn up, be dreadful in the first half and world class in the second, or be fantastic one game and look like he's consumed a bottle of tequila before kick-off the next. We know this. We've known this for a long time with Firmino, and those ups and downs do come a bit more regularly now than they used to. At the minute, he is our most impactful player. That's how it is. So you don't take him out of the team when the rest of the side is struggling for cohesion and ability to play at their highest level and all the rest of it. That would just be a silly thing to do, in my opinion.
No, I probably agree. I think Darwin... I think the only question, someone mentioned it in the chat there, I think the only question is, do we need to protect Bobby? But I think we got to start him and then maybe protect him if he's not performing or he's fatigued or whatever. But Bournemouth was basically a weekend off, let's be fair. And then if needs be, Darwin... Is it Napoli on... Is it Wednesday or Tuesday? Darwin can probably play that one and probably more suited to that one, if anything.
And as I've said before as well, Firmino doesn't really play the 90 minutes too often. I think as the season goes on, he is going to be one of the 60-30 players. So he'll either start and play the hour, which, again, I think even against Bournemouth, he came off, didn't he, after being on a hat-trick and all the rest of it? Mm-hmm. Or he comes on for the half hour to try and either turn things around or give us a different route of attack, that sort of thing. That's what I see Firmino's role as being best used as. He obviously doesn't play at full tilt all game long anymore, but you can get an awful lot out of him in either a 60 or a 30. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with him starting. And then Darwin is eased back into things, let's say, because he will come off the bench, you'd imagine.
Yeah. And I think the Klopp said Jota's back in training this week, didn't he? Or next week?
Yeah, it should be. So. We should have Jota, Thiago, Cueve, and then obviously Curtis and Matip are already back. So we should have 5 senior faces back, most of them for this game, at least available, but obviously it will depend on a couple of those injuries, I would imagine, especially Jota, because it's the injury that he had and the explosive actions that will need to overcome. Maybe he doesn't make the bench for this one, but he'll be a bit closer to playing again anyway.
And Naby's back from his fake injury.
Naby will be back the moment the transfer window closes.
Yeah. After the Everton game, Naby will be back in the team, unless he has done something really badly. Or he might just be sold, who knows? We may have made ourselves look silly, but who cares? So basically run through our team quite quickly. Alisson, Trent, Gomez, Van Dijk, Tsimikas. I'd probably agree with Tsimikas, to be fair, the way Robbo's been playing. Andy looks weird with the broken fingers, so that's putting me off. It matters to me. It's like when Suarez didn't play with that bandage thing on his hand, right? Midfield, Fab, Milner, Elliott, I'd agree with that. And then the front three from the Newcastle game as well. Squad options, Carvalho last night. Again, that's probably a couple games. I know the Bournemouth game wasn't really a game. It was more a training session. But Carvalho, every time he plays, he seems to be looking a bit more confident and a bit more Premier League ready. I'm not saying he's an option to start in this one, but if we're looking to rotate a bit, would Carvalho getting a longer stretch in the game or maybe a start in the midweek game?
Again, I think if it wasn't probably in Everton, maybe you would think about it a bit more. My only concern, and it's not really a concern, but just a situation which unfortunately he might find himself a part of right now, is Liverpool's fixture list coming up now is a lot harder than it was in the games that we've gone past. So he's done well to be involved in the games that he has, but obviously part of that was injuries. Would he have come off the bench, Thiago and Keita and the rest of it? Not so sure. But now we play Everton, Napoli. Wolves is a tricky, sneaky game. Ajax, Chelsea. So it's not the easiest run. With a few people coming back, maybe you get him a run out somewhere in there against like Wolves or Ajax, maybe, because they're both at home. and they're not maybe as good.
Do Ajax have a team?
We'll see. Ajax might be having a really busy day today, so
yes.
we might be facing Ajax, which is like one of those World 11 teams they put together on short notice for a charity match or something like that.
All the Dutch regens in the world.
So we'll see what their squad looks like closed tomorrow. So I would be tempted to start him, but I'm hesitant to start both him and Elliott. That's the thing. I don't think it's because they're both very young, but because they're both so offensive minded. I think
them two would be the ones you rotate, wouldn't it?
Yeah,
at the minute,
unless you play one of them wide forward, that would be fine. If Diaz needs a rest or want to use him on the right wing and rest Salah or something like that, then you can put Carvalho in the team as the left forward and leave Elliott right midfield. I don't think I would start both of them in the eights at the moment together.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. In terms of duels in this game, then, I'm guessing the midfield's a key one because we've mentioned Iwobi's probably been their best player. Onana looks, chaotic is the word, and we don't know who else will be with them, whereas the troubles we've had in that position are quite documented. I think Fabinho's looking a bit better. I don't think he's been horrendous by any means, which kind of turned into the narrative. Elliott, as I said, been our best player, and Milner's been... it's just been Milner. That's all you have to say about James Milner. So is that probably the main duel there? Because we know they're going to sit deep and stuff like that, but if we can get a Bobby or a Diaz exposed on one of their players and not have 12 players around him, that's probably our key to success, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, Elliott against Iwobi is going to be really interesting because Iwobi's basically been their left-sided midfielder, whether it's been in the 2 or the 3. So how they track each other and who wins that sort of ball-winning duel that they're both very, very keen to get involved in. Neither of them are primarily defensive midfielders, but both of them do that defensive side of the job really, really well. And this season, as I've said, I think both of those two are the best 2 players for each team. So that's going to be a really interesting one-on-one. I'm not sure what the word is here, not hopeful. I'm very curious to see how Salah does against Mykolenko, because he's actually been playing pretty well, Mykolenko has. He's very, very tight marker, quite aggressive in the challenge, but they don't tend to have the centre-backs too close to the fullbacks. So maybe at last we might see Salah get a few one-on-ones with a bit of space in behind. That hasn't happened too often this season. On the other hand, if they do start with McNeil left mid or something like that, then we could again see him doubled up by fullback and midfield. So it could be another game where Salah is finding it very, very difficult to get space, to be honest. We have seen this season the moments in matches where he got more space to focus was when Darwin was on the pitch, because Darwin is a big old man and he occupies a man or two himself, doesn't he? So that return of him could be good for Salah later in the match, let's say, if it is Darwin off the bench for Firmino or similar later in the game. Other than that, it's got to be the tracking of the runners again, which probably Gomez's recovery speed against Gordon on the counter is going to be one thing, and whoever is Everton's second bombing on midfielder, whether that's Nana or Davies or whoever they decide to put in, and if Milner stroke Fabinho cover them properly this time, because the runners from deep has again been something which has troubled us far too much this season. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely has. Even in the last derby, Anthony Gordon dived for most of them, but even in that game last season, it was an issue. So yeah, hopefully we fix that. Anything before we go to predictions?
I don't think so. I think this will be a bit of a difficult watch at times, to be fair. I don't think that we can say that we're playing so well that this is just going to be a game we absolutely cruise through. And Everton are pretty poo in terms of their build-up play and in terms of their structure and organisation, and that's what we need to make the most of, is the fact that they don't have the spaces between players off the ball all sorted out yet. They don't have a specific sitter in between the defensive and midfield lines. They don't have partnerships all over the pitch between centre-backs and centre-back and full-back and the guy ahead of them. They don't have that all set out yet, and we have to make use of that. But the only way you make use of that is if you have 1, movement, and 2, speed of play. Now, our movement's pretty good, but the speed of play this season is not. So if we don't up that, then you don't make the most of what Everton are bad at this moment in time. And it's not a new thing. A lot of Premier League teams are the same. If you don't play quick enough, you don't expose what they're not good at. So all I want to see again is from kickoff, similar to against Bournemouth, obviously not expecting the same sort of scoreline, but that we play quicker, that we play more aggressive, that we are much more in their faces in the final third. And, well, we can all dream. So hopefully we can have a second game in the last 9 where we actually score first.
It could be 0-0. Could be 0-0.
Cheers. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for all that, yeah.
I'm optimistic, man. I was going to say 2-1. I was just giving the options, but I'm going to go with 2-1 to Liverpool. They obviously score first because it's a trend now. But what are you going with?
I'll go with 3-1. I do think that they'll score as well. I can see Gordon scoring again, probably just to be annoying. I think it'll be a very tight game. I don't think it will be like 2 goals clear very easily or anything like that, but maybe later on, if they're really pushing, then we do get another couple of counter-attacking opportunities and don't completely screw it up this time.
Yeah, hopefully, and it's not bloody last minute. Well, it could be funny if it's last minute, but
it has
for
been
my
before.
own, yes. Well, we're missing Origi. Maybe Carvalho's the new Origi. Late goal against Newcastle. If you start scoring against Everton, I mean, he's just Champions League goals away from being Origi. But yeah, I think that is everything, unless any news is broken or anything like that. But before we go, Karl, anything you want to plug?
Just the things that I've been plugging over the last couple of podcasts, to be honest. There's a piece on The Independent on transfers coming over to Europe of young American players, and speaking to the owner and sporting director of one of the clubs over there, how they're doing it and why and all the rest of it. It's a USL team, which makes it very different from MLS. Quite an interesting read, even if I say so myself. And I will have the usual European look ahead to the weekend and what to look out for and expect, and probably a bit of a rundown of the transfers abroad.
Beautiful. And from me, I'll be on too many podcasts either in the background or on the forefront whilst Dave's away. But thank you everyone for listening, especially those who've listened live on Discord. Goodbye.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this Anfield Index show. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel so future podcasts find their way to your device automatically. There's nothing quite like fan engagement, and we'd love to know what you think of anything discussed on this show. The best way to get in touch is over on our free Discord community, where both podcasters and listeners debate the hottest LFC topics 24/7. Sign up free now at AnfieldIndex.com/Discord. You won't regret it. You can also follow us on Twitter at Anfield Index and find us on Facebook by searching for Anfield Index. Oh, and before you go, we'd love it if you could leave us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast app. It only takes a couple of seconds, and it means the world to the people who create these free shows.